Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. I am excited to have this conversation. I'm here with Kurt Ouchida. He is the managing partner at BrainTrust Agency. BrainTrust Agency is a modern marketing agency for the modern market. Kurt has also received a handful of accolades in his luxurious career: top 40 under 40 from the Business Executives, Rising Star from the Travel Agent Magazine, and Entrepreneur of the Year from the Las Vegas Business Press. He is also a post-president at the Public Relations Society of America, Las Vegas chapter. Hope I nailed that right. I'm excited. Thank you, Kurt, for coming on.
Well, you got the pronunciation of my name correct, so that's a big thing because there's a lot of trauma that goes in that first day of elementary school when you get, a pronunciation from different teachers that kind of goes the full gamut. So I've advised my sons that, we have like our own little self-made family crest is a 0 or an O and then the face of a cheetah on the inside. So, also speaks to the fact that, I'm tall, skinny, and I apparently run fast, but I have no stamina. So there you go.
That's absolutely hilarious. It's funny because whenever I start a podcast, I always ask the guest first I attempt their name and then they usually correct me. And then for some reason, even though I read it out loud, there's like this mental lapse where I'm like, crap, did I get it right? Did I not get it right? So like maybe 5 or 10 episodes, I literally mess up on the name, even though they just told me.
I just keep your mind on that image.
Right. Well, first I want to thank you and the BrainTrust Agency team for helping me out. You guys have been kind of silent supporters, sending me clients to come onto the show. And that was something that I didn't even think or fathom when I first started the podcast, was that this could also be like a network for PR agencies to send their clients on so that they can also get some publicity as well.
Well, Jake, your channel is something that a lot of people should know about. And PR agencies, by their very nature, to which it's one of our practice areas, is the channel of storytellers, right? We need to be able to position a client in a way where whoever their target audience or the consumer or whatnot needs to be able to see and bring to light and tell a story that's hopefully very compelling. And then whether that story compels somebody to join the cause, put a coin in a slot, a head in a bed, or, sign up for something, I think it's important. So I applaud you for having the gumption to get something, up and running and being that effective. I know you've had a whole slate of high profile guests, to which I don't consider myself one of them, but I applaud you. I'm a big podcast listener. As you start to shape your shows, I think PR agencies, those that are true PR, are the ones that are going to find true value. And again, having an audience with you to reach your listeners. It's kind of the quid pro quo, right? Mm-hmm. And hopefully they do have something to say. And, hopefully your listeners today find that, I didn't bore them to tears, because there's a lot of Kleenex out there, I imagine.
Well, first, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Before I started the podcast, I kind of sat around also as an avid podcast listener for a handful of years. Joe Rogan's a big inspiration. And as I sat, I kind of thought of the idea in 2018. I realized, why is there no Joe Rogan Vegas? Why is there no popular Vegas talk show? I saw some have kind of come and gone, but I have a background. I worked on the Strip for 10 years. I have kind of entrepreneurial background as well. And the thing that I learned about Vegas is it's actually the people that make up Vegas. My manager from Omnia Nightclub used to always say, look, Omnia is this world famous nightclub. That's what's going to lure the guests in. But what keeps them coming back is you, the staff, the employees.
And the service.
And that's kind of what I realized about the city is Vegas is such a diverse economy. Yes, it is a little dependent on tourism now, but you see different industries kind of popping up in different areas: adult entertainment, film. There's this kind of a blooming tech scene that's beginning to happen, entrepreneurship. So I really just try to capture those kind of people on the show. And it just I just couldn't figure out why this has never happened before.
Well, I think you're filling a need. I'll vote for you. And I believe that even we've talked internally about filling this niche. So this town is filled with stories, but it's also filled with the characters to support those stories. And then more than that, it's filled with the events that have, so much impact in what happens in the daily lives, whether it's we didn't have sports marketing until 5 years ago. And then now you see how that has ballooned. You'll see that there are other shows to which, I listen to KNPR State of Nevada, And, Joe Shaneman has a true audience and he has followers, but I also was good friends with the fellow that sat in that chair prior to that. But theirs, had politics involved and was purely, kind of this omnibus look at the marketplace. But I think that you're filling in a real need area, because I couldn't agree more. And I think the more, my team works with you and we can get stories told, gives you a chance to hopefully pick and choose. Because I agree with you there. It's a niche you're filling, but there's also there's so much depth to this marketplace that people don't really give it a chance. But you're giving them a chance, because I know you've had a very colorful list of people that have come on your broadcast.
Yeah, to really just try to shed light. I want the show to be a tool for the locals and also maybe some tourists who maybe are considering moving out here, to see that it's more than just a strip, and there's plenty full of opportunities. All you have to do is really just reach out to those entrepreneurs, because that's something that I've learned is people who have some sort of status, it seems like it's almost masquerade in like this entitlement. But then when you actually directly talk to them, you realize that they're just similar to you. They're just humans who want to give back in some sort of sense. Yeah.
I moved out here in the early 90s, and I came out here from San Francisco. And I, at that time, represented an agency, and I was given the opportunity to open an office here, a satellite office. And, did my research, read a book called The Greenfelt Jungle.
Not familiar with that.
It was written back in the day, probably in the 50s, and it portrayed, the underbelly of the mafia. And it was intriguing because, I'd seen The Godfather and so on. But I also saw that Las Vegas was kind of the Wild West. So if you turn the clock back, close to 30 years, then you see that it wasn't what we are now. Certainly wasn't in terms of population. Certainly wasn't in terms of the offerings. And then you had this 4-mile corridor that was just coming into the mega resort craze. And then you had, it came to a T at Fremont Street, which still had, vehicular traffic on it, right?
Seems
and
so crazy.
then a canopy was put over that. And then, billions of dollars worth of investment, came from, Wall Street to invest in this thing called tourism. And, I've always thought that, and it's part of the reason why I alongside Michael Coldwell, started BrainTrust, because we had an entrepreneurial bent. And we realized that we were in a marketplace that kind of fed off innovation, that fed off with new ideas. I mean, if you just use the Strip as an example, right? Those ideas could never be built in any other city, maybe Shanghai, but to come together to get, that type of funding to execute on an idea, whether it was, recreating Lake Como, or even now, right, with what we're about to see with Resorts World, right? 100,000 square foot, video screen that
That's
everybody's,
insane.
and they're, and they're selling that as ad space. How supremely smart is that? So I've always thought this humble little town, because we're still a town of 2.3 million, I think, last count.
Yeah, it's about that.
Because we all know one another. And I've been here long enough to know, not to say where the bodies are buried, but I've been here long enough where there is a small network of folks, who I guess because of that tenure would consider me a true Nevadan, right? Because I've kind of lived through not only that meteoric growth, but, Michael and I started this agency in 2006. We're celebrating our 15th year.
Congrats.
But we survived the first recession, right? We had to reinvent ourselves as a result of, 2006 and 2008, right? The market crashes. And then, of course, nothing can compare or prepare us for, this cataclysmic event, which is, 1 year in the making, right? March, April of last year was really a trying time, I think, for any agency out there, and quite frankly, the whole marketplace. Mm-hmm. So, there's something to be said about, having the courage of your convictions like you and starting something like this, and knowing full well with the confidence that you have that you're filling a need, to, putting your money where your mouth is and investing in it with this fabulous studio that you've set, to then also taking on, bringing on people, shaping them into a team, and then delivering on a service. And you mentioned your days at Omnia. Everybody had a cookie cutter, right, style of nightlife, but what separated where you used to work? It was service, it was access, it was entertainment. And I think, there's a lot of that, which I think we hold very pridefully towards, is that, job one, working at our agency, you got to have a helper gene. And you got to be willing to roll up your sleeves, much like I did today, and do effective strategic work. And I think that's a thing that I don't think it necessarily separates us from any of the others, but I think you build a culture upon that, a culture of helping, and I think that expresses itself in doing smart campaigns, doing campaigns now, with all the tools that we have that are trackable, because. This as well as I, everybody wants instant gratification through instant knowledge, through controlling when they're going to get the message to when they're going to consume it and having all that. And I think even, the past year when so many of us worked from home, I think it might have ratcheted up a bit because now you had more control over the time of your day and you were still effective doing it. And we've proven that you can do that from afar. But I think there is an interesting, kind of new shape to the way we have to market. And it does come down to, every dollar in has to result in a multiplier out to then the tracking of all my data and what that ultimately means to, a client or a customer.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you and Michael started this business in 2006. And now you said that there's a monumental change because of the shift in remote working and e-commerce and a digital-based economy. Where did your attention, where was your focus at first in Vegas when you went to open this business? And then how has it shifted to now?
It has shifted considerably. And our philosophy was, we were two guys coming from the casino hospitality industry, both held corporate marketing positions. So hospitality was our wheelhouse, right? F&B wheelhouse, certainly casinos. And we still have a number of clients that fit in that vertical. But, I moved out here in 93 and I moved out here because that office I mentioned had just been awarded a contract and we needed to fulfill that contract. You needed to have local representation. And it was to essentially fight for a cause. And I was like, great. So through the DNA of everybody that comes to work at BrainTrust is that, not only is the helper gene a big part of it, but it's also, getting involved in a cause. So we represent a number of nonprofits. And the way that shaped itself is that, we have a client mix per se, probably when we got out the door, 15 years ago, it's probably 85% hospitality gaming. And this all came from high profile word of mouth, right? I mean, both Michael and I, we led careers that, we both had big seats at the table. We both were obviously very effective, but, changes were made, decisions were made. We had a fateful cup of coffee at Panavino. And, he and I immediately saw, not only the fact that we saw the marketing world differently, but for that matter, we had hired and fired a lot of the same agencies, even agencies from LA that were brought on to do a number of things. So, we had a great conversation, which resulted in, hey, I think we should, and we did. And our first clients were like, hey, Michael, I understand you started your own company. I got a project. You guys want to work on it? Hey, Kurt, by the way, I understand that you've joined with Michael Caldwell. You guys should think about doing this. So through what I would consider high profile word of mouth and the fact that, our reputations were what they were given our backgrounds, that it almost was like people came to us. So the first years really were great. They were great. I mean, two guys became four, became getting an office space, became, putting in a lot of investment into doing that and ultimately owning a building. Then you had, of course, 2008, right? And then you got to reinvent
bump
yourself,
in the
right?
road.
So, we had represented, the whole condo hotel craze was at its height. I mean, we represented a number of the big flags on the Strip. And when that all blew up, in the same way it blew up March of last year, we were, I think, shrewd enough at the time to kind of shift an 85 to 15 split to kind of a 65-35. And then now, thankfully during that downturn, we had government contracts, we had nonprofit contracts, and that helped kind of buoy this. Now, we're still filling a hole, and I think every other agency has to nod yes that they are, because it's come back and it's a lot different. And it's a lot different with what I just mentioned, right? Every dollar in needs to show multiples out, but every dollar in now is fought for over tooth and nail. And, we're an agency that's, we're not everything to everybody. And maybe we're an acquired taste in certain respects, but I'm confident with the team that we have on the field, especially with great leadership in the form of, not only Mike Wojtovich, but, Grace Russell, that we have the right people, because we survived together through this downturn, and we're coming out of it stronger, but we're still out there beating the street, and we're still out there, going after the next, we're not going after the grand opening of, the next, dog biscuit bakery or something like that. But, we're returning back to some of our roots, but we've been smart about, we're going to balance that out in terms of the division between the hospitality, gaming, the things that we, I wouldn't say we do in our sleep, but, there's certainly, that's the wheelhouse that Michael and I come from. It's the wheelhouse that a number of the folks who work for us, come from as well, to then spreading our wings even much wider in the space of professional services and so on. So, it's an exciting time. And I think you could probably tell, I'm, even after 15 years, I'm as passionate now as I was day one, when Michael and I shook hands and decided to do this thing called BrainTrust.
Yeah, it sounds like your marketing makeup or your client makeup is very analogous to almost an investment portfolio or a startup, right? You're very risk on, very heavy, weighted to one side, whether it's a asset that you own or your client is 50% of your income. And then over time, you begin to diversify it into things like government contracts, entrepreneurial startup businesses, different casinos, so that when a downturn does come, you're not put out of business, because something that I've learned through the startup world is it's all about survival. Yeah. It's those who survive, those who win in a capitalist model, or those who are able to survive and have the foresight to pivot in the direction required based on the circumstances that surround you.
Thanks. That's exactly right, man. I'm with you 100%. Diversifying the portfolio was really the lesson that came out of the 2008 downturn. Now that's not easy, right? It's easier to philosophize on that, what that truly means, but you got to go get it, right? You got to qualify for it. And it's tremendously competitive, right? And what I fear, and what Michael and I both fear collectively, is, I hate to say it, but, there's a race to the bottom sometimes, right? Where you think you can, where a potential client thinks they can get a better deal, someplace else, or a better deal by doing this as opposed to that. And, it's still kind of a level of poetry where you do need to better understand and educate folks on the true value of what you're getting. Because, right, and there are agencies that are fly-by-nights, right? They're going to gouge you, they're going to do this. And, we're always in for the long-term play, and build the relationship with, the client who we're involved with, whether chief marketing officer, vice president of marketing, or for that matter, advertising, or anybody on that side of the marketing aisle. It's important to, form a bond. It's important to better understand them, but then also be able to add value to not only outthinking, but giving them opportunity, because, they too have to take a budget in front of somebody and talk about what this resulted in. And, given the fact that both Michael and I could reminisce about, managing a non-revenue generating department, for a big casino conglomerate, and walking down, this lonely hallway to meet with the CFO on the 30th or 31st of every month and justify what the hell you did for the company. So that's a level of discipline that we've applied to all of our team, that, think bigger picture, right? And better understand what that ultimately means, because, it's not like, they just don't write the check to say, hey, you did a good job. No, it's like, hey, show us. And then we're still a part of that show me generation. It just so happens that the show me is like, show me tomorrow what I need to know today, right? Yeah,
that's kind of the ethos of Vegas. And you kind of brought this point up earlier about instant gratification, because that's how the Strip operates. It's an instant gratification kind of town. you provide some sort of wait service. You perform some sort of service, you give them a drink, you stroke their ego, whatever it is, and then they give you a tip. That's kind of how this city has worked. It's the same with the networking nature of the town. You want to go into a nightclub, you walk up, you tell security guard, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I know Jim, who's the manager, and you get the instant gratification of the security guard acknowledging who you are, and they let you in instantly. So that's kind of the nature of the city. It's funny you brought that up because a handful of people acknowledge that, but not many people speak on it publicly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It was, and there's a funny mix I've noticed too, is that a lot of people can afford to buy that access, right? And you think about, there are a lot of powerful people in town, with big titles working for great, wonderful companies, but oftentimes they don't want to pay for it, and it's the access. The access is more valuable to them because it is who you know. Mm-hmm. And, scratching a back here, is reciprocated in scratching your back there. And I've always found that fascinating about the nightlife set of it, right? It's not, it really has it's whose name you dropped, and everybody plays the name game in this town, right?
Yeah, name drop economy.
Yeah, and I've always said this town is built on it's 2 degrees of separation. It's not your Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation, right? It's really 2. And if you think you look at who you could call to get to so and so, it's interesting how that access, but that access also has to be earned. There has to be some common denominator of the value of what that ultimately means. So it's not like. And I guess the flip side of that is, right, you just don't want to be known for, I know so-and-so such and such. There's got to be a story behind it.
So did you realize the nature of Vegas when you first moved out here, that it is small by nature? I know you moved out here a few years ago, but I know for some who move out here, they don't realize that your voice, your persona travels much farther than your dollars can. Right. Did that take you? Did you immediately recognize that trend, or did it take you a little bit to understand?
I think I came out to represent a political issue. So, and this is 1993, and I remember the very first. So I was flying out from San Francisco, right? So August in San Francisco. What's that famous saying? The coldest winter you ever, what is it? Was Samuel Clemens, right? Mm-hmm. Mark Twain said the coldest winter he ever spent was the summer in San Francisco. So I think it was 50 degree and foggy in August of 1993. And I got out on a plane and it was 100 degrees at like midnight. And I had a dinner meeting with a fella who I was going to work with. And I immediately saw that this fella who was a former, I think he worked at the local television station at one point of his career. And he was kind of a mover and shaker and definitely a connector. And, it was, again, a political issue. So, it was all who you knew and what influence they could favor upon you. Now, you realize that, I don't know if it hits you in the face at some point, but then you realize that you're an outsider. And I think it takes a while to be accepted. I networked as best as I could, but I was alone. I had to invest in, new friendships. I had no family in town. In fact, I was warned by my spinster aunt, if I find out you're hanging out at a casino and all this stuff and, showgirls and blah, 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 you're going to hear it from me. I was like, Auntie, that's not what Las Vegas is. And it goes back to your point. I always thought it was incredible. It's one of the best kept secrets, and obviously it's not a secret, right? But I think the first moment I came here, I had my little car, and I drove the perimeter. You know what the perimeter was? It was like Rainbow was as far, it ran north-south, but it was far east as you could get.
Yeah, it's just dirt right after that. It's just
dirt, right? And where my wife and I live now, that didn't even exist. And, it was kind of interesting to have those, it's the old, when I went, I wore snowshoes to get to the bus stop to go, it's not that sort of stuff. But, kind of fitting in, getting to know and, observing, and then getting involved in associations like the PRSA, I think that was important. And then the level of networking, right? You can go to networking events and, there are 99 people in the room that really have no interest in hearing from you, but it's that one person. And, then you start to get involved in that. And then getting involved in community activities was important. And then getting involved in the nonprofit side of the world, which again is a big value for not only my family, but for the agency as a whole. So, it's been almost 30 years. And, I'd like to think that, when Michael and I, we knew of each other, but we were competitors to one another, and he was at a rival property. And, if you can turn back the clock of our first encounter, we needed to kind of compare notes and size each other up. But, there was this immediate connection that, number one, we both had drive. We both had a vision for what we eventually wanted to do. We also had a sense of what others had done and how we might be able to improve upon that model, to then kind of the competitive nature that he and I have to this day, and it'll never change. We push each other. We push each other to get more innovative. We push each other, to outscore one another in terms of, hey, what do you have working on? What can we do? And how can we best join forces to go and get that? And I love that. I thrive on that. And, that in and of itself, you do good work, you join the right things. I wouldn't say you're seen at the right places, but I think that over time, you do start, there's confidence. And, reputation is key, right? There are competitors out there who, may think differently. There are others who've worked with us and may think, entirely differently as well. But, if we stand behind our effort, if we stand behind our service, and we stand behind the results of our campaign, then, everything else should fall into place.
And from the conversations I've had with multiple founders on here, the pre-internet days was a highly risky situation to partner up with somebody of a competitive business, whereas now the model with podcasters, influencers, a creative economy, it's encouraged to collaborate, because if you get two people who capture attention and put them on the same screen, then it's going to amplify it to not just 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 = 5. Whereas pre-internet, it was more hyper competitive, and from what I've learned, seemed like a little bit more tribal in nature. So to go on and take a risk and to partner with somebody with a different agency or who was competitor to you in the casino world, just did not seem like it was a common thing back then.
Well, I think going forward, we've probably the last 5 years have been far more collaborative than competitive. We're still competitive because certainly I believe in my people that we can deliver on that. But if it's a matter of aligning ourselves with an agency that offers the same thing, but they'll take that side of it, we'll take this side, and we'll create a firm lane between us, we're doing a lot more of that. And I'm truly open to that. And I think that while it took a little while, because it's just the competitive nature, right? You want it all.
Yeah, you're fighting for resources, not attention.
Yeah. And so there have been some very effective collaborations that both Mike and Grace, who are seated here, have had a big hand in. And, it's all friendly competition with the other agency, but yeah, we've managed to, combine, like your wonderful math, 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. Yeah, that's certainly been the case. Mm-hmm. And I do like that for the way we're going forward, because, there are other practice areas too that I will contact them that, hey, I know you're not doing this, but if you take care of this, I can handle this portion of your overall program. Yeah. And that's been received pretty well.
Yeah, mutually beneficial relationship. So when you do bring on new clients, what are they generally asking from BrainTrust? Like what is the most common aspect or attention of need for onboarding new clients?
Right. Well, which day of the week is it, right?
We'll say it's Wednesday on this occasion.
So on this Wednesday, we've, if I look at the way Michael and I have created practice groups, right? We didn't, when we first opened, right, in June 20th, 2006, right, we both had PR and general marketing in our backdrop, right? We have since then added, media buying. We have since then added, a true PR practitioner who was running an integrated communications team, right, that then includes social media, Then we had a whole creative division added, and then we added branding. So as we started to get more innovative and address the needs, a lot of this was driven by market demand, right? Hey, Kurt, I know you do this well. Have you thought about doing that? Hey, Michael, I understand, you can handle this for us, but can you bring some people in to do that? So as we have layered on and become far more integrated and diverse with our offering, I mentioned, which day of the week it is. I mean, Swiss Army knife or not, we can do a lot of different work. But what we spurred to happen, late 2019, and of course, it didn't get out of the box like we had hoped because of COVID, was to really be smart about the digital space. Now, we've always dabbled in digital, being trackable, but we brought in the right people, with the right cultural bent, with the right drive that was, very, very similar to Michael and I's. And then we've gotten a whole new division that we're running through a platform. And we've taken a lot of these things that you normally don't find agencies bringing in-house, and we brought those in-house. And that has become, that technology shift for us, number one, led to our fulfillment to one another that, hey, man, we still need to be relevant, right? Because at 15 years of age, if you want to stay in one lane, you can, but you're only going to swim the same stroke over and over. We have multiple lanes, we have multiple things to say, multiple offerings, and quite frankly, we're more valuable to the client that brings us in, right? Because we speak agnostic marketing over all different, genres and all different dialects of marketing. So now PR knows what digital is doing, digital knows what advertising doing, media buy, traditional, digital, it all kind of weaves itself together. So we have, pretty in-depth conversations, and they might just choose one. But, I mentioned early on that, people are demanding the trackability and the reporting on, okay, what happened for this, and you need to tell me what they did, how you converted, and we can follow the true sales funnel for a client. And let me tell you, that's in huge demand.
It is.
And I'm really prideful for the team that we have on the field that's doing that. And, we'll wrap up this call. I got another thing just to put together another proposal related to just that.
Yeah, digital marketing, just the digital space is going to take over. It seems like it's just becoming much larger, much more demand. I've had a few different PR and marketing people on here. Like the traditional, I know marketing back in the day using things like billboards and physical pieces and placement inside casinos for different spaces seems to not be as popularized as social media marketing. And now you see it through Instagram and now even TikTok and some of these other ones.
Get your dance on.
Right? Where it's almost like a pay for play kind of model where they're almost forcing you to pay, or your Instagram followers or 40% of your Instagram followers are going to see your posts, which therefore creates some sort of heartache. And then it made me realize that this digital marketing is actually much more dense than the just tertiary layer that you see when you're a consumer. What's up, YouTube? We're going to take a quick 60-second break to give a shout out to the first ever sponsor of the Guest List podcast. And it is none other than Manscaped. It's June, summer is here, Fremont Street is packed. I was out the last 3 nights till 3 a.m. It felt like old Vegas. We're getting ready to go to the day clubs. And for one, as a man, we need to make sure that we are trimmed in the right areas. I'm a big fan of Manscaped. Like I said, I use the product. I'm happy that they came on to be a sponsor. But lucky for us, they just came out with a brand new product for us. And I'm going to read it off just so I don't mess up. From the legends who introduced the greatest electric ball hair trimmer ever, Manscaped is now introducing the Ultra Smooth Package, a razor and formulation kit designed for the brave men out there who like to go to the skin when they trim their balls. Your new nickname is going to be the Bald Eagle after using the Ultra Smooth Package. Here's a picture of it. Make sure you guys use the discount code TheGuestList. You're listening to The Guest List. Use the promo code TheGuestList. Very simple. you'll get 20% off and free shipping anywhere in the United States. If you're a fan of the show down here in Vegas, you know this is a must. So make sure you go to manscaped.com, use the code TheGuestList for 20% off and free shipping. Your balls will thank you. Now let's get back to the show.
I think it is. I think that, certainly it is. You just mentioned how it is. But I think the thing that, what I've believed in and what our team really focuses on is the content strategy related to that. Nothing gets out the door without a sound strategy from the BrainTrust side, right? Set it and forget it. Our people, you can follow best practices, but are those best practices yours for that particular client? Everybody can do a search and say, hey, we're doing this, so therefore, and they can follow a trend. But to be a true trendsetter and to show value to the client is you got to have them provide not only their vision for where they want to take this, and through, in-depth comprehensive discovery, better understand what their true key performance indicators are going to be. What their, you hate to say it's like an interview, right? What's your 5-year plan? But, I think there are, and, if you gain comfort, right, with somebody who's going to disclose that and, despite the CFO, like, we can't show them numbers. I mean, if you really want us to be valuable to you, you got to give us some window into where financially you want this campaign to be. And, I think Michael and I, from those lessons from back in the day, from informing our team to make sure that every decision that is made strategically with the bottom line in mind. Because, there's so many vanity metrics that, you know of, right? Just because you had somebody tune in, what did they ultimately do with that information? How were they pushed to a call to action that then made them convert, which then made your advertiser want to now ratchet up the spend with you? So I think there are aspects of that I think all have to be kind of jumbled into this, but then factored and analyzed into an executable plan. And I think that's where we've always prided ourselves. We can't do anything. We're not the push button agency. We're not. We're going to repaint the whole thing and turn it back to you even better than you thought.
Yeah, that's a lesson that I've come to learn is how do you interpret data and the analytics on the back end, applying your critical thought and your creative process, but also having somebody on the other side that can be almost a dartboard to tell you, hey, you hit a bullseye maybe on this idea, maybe you missed the entire board on this idea. But I've learned that when it comes to marketing in the digital space, you need to have a nice team, but also, like you said, not just be a push button type of person, because that only lasts for so long. And the digital space, it grows really fast and it's very innovative. And so trends become obsolete very fast.
Yeah, they do. And I think it's kind of hearkening back to, when Michael and I worked for the big corporate casinos, I became accustomed to something I used to call, they call it a dashboard back then. We call it a dashboard today. And that is that, right, the Monday after the Saturday, Sunday, analysis of all the gaming win was always seen in a top of the fold dashboard by all the executives where I used to work. They needed to have their finger on the pulse of what the hell transpired. And the amount of money, coin in, beds, right, all the different all the different revenue generators. And they needed a one sheet, and they needed it now, right? Because number one, they needed to better understand it because it's some quarterly earnings report. They're needing to better understand what the trend was and why this particular 3-day holiday weekend when there were, 250,000 people in town. Did we operate at 100% occupancy, and was our yield on our, ADR this as opposed to that? So it was that sort of discipline, and Michael can tell you about his examples too. It's like, that is something we carried forward. And it gets back to that whole, I need to know data instantaneously. I need to know it now. And people have their reasons for knowing it, but our reasons for presenting it is that you're empowered to know. So we have performed or we have created the art form of making sure that folks that get involved with us have in the moment, on the moment, to the second, digital dashboards related to everything they want in terms of the money that went in, the money that went out. And and that is something, and not that I'm sharing an industry secret, but I think that that's what people are growing more accustomed to demanding. So, you start with strategy, you start with discovery, you start with strategy, you start with how we're going to take your spend and get multiples on it. But then once the spend is in play and you need to adjust it, then they have every right to say, hey, how are you spending my money? And it's that sort of thing, I think, that, again, is going to be something we're going to continue to perform upon, because these tools I mentioned to you, allows us to, start to gauge data points across millions of different factors.
And when you're analyzing data, what are you generally looking for? Are you looking for we'll just say the viewers, right, that come across this digital campaign? Are you looking for conversion for them to sign up to an email list? Is it for them to buy a product? Is it to them to just be recognized? Like, what? I know this can maybe be a few-pronged approach to it, but what are they generally looking for?
Converting them to sign on something, sell on something. That's the key for us. And it's always the last attribution theory, right? What was the last thing they did before they converted? And there's science that needs to go into that. But, we are able to distill from hundreds of different data points to then start to create first-party audiences where we then get a trend set on how they're behaving. So what we're going to serve to them. And then having, again, a proprietary platform that allows us to then push a different ad to somebody who trended, who looked left, as opposed to a different ad to somebody who looked right. And, that's the level of, I think, sophistication of the programs that we provide that people are looking for. And then they can look for, because then we will, put and distill it like, this was working, it was based upon this attribution, and this is what we gained. This is the attribution we lost, and it was based upon this criteria. So, I love the data science of this side of it. I mean, it's not as sexy as, the marketing side. And, the days of just pretty pictures on a page are long gone, right? There's so much loaded into what we do in terms of branding, right? The psychology we put into the colors that we selected, to the imagery and the motion within that imagery that you're going to want to know so that it has meaning. Because, nothing is without its brand essence. I mean, a foundation of any campaign needs to be built upon really the structure of what do you stand for? And, that's a big part of another big area of growth for us.
It sounds like a story is almost being told through the data and the analytics on the back end. And those agencies that succeed are those who are able to see the story and follow along, and then you basically can write the perfect ending to the story or to the movie that everybody wants to see.
And write the next chapter, right? So we have the words. We just need to be able to finish that, with the right type of appeal. Because, if it's not compelling, you miss the mark. Mm-hmm. But if you miss the mark, it, and you have the data that supports why you did, then you adjust and you move on. And, again, in this area of wanting to know, if you can say, hey, hold on, I have a better idea, that is very intriguing to, somebody sitting across the boardroom. Okay, show me, prove it to me. Give me more data of why they look left as opposed to looking right. And now I'll have, a better sense of how we can best spend the next amount of money to get them to look right as opposed to left.
And just speaking in Vegas terms, or the clients of Vegas, are they generally coming to BrainTrust for brand recognition or for product sales? Because I know for casinos, it's a little bit different because they're just trying to lure in the customers, right. And therefore they could be buying into a handful of products, where if a startup comes to you and they have one product, then it might be a little bit different approach.
Well, we've covered the gamut, right? So, again, flattening the portfolio so that it resonates on both sides of the professional services as well as hospitality, gaming, and so on. But then also the e-commerce side has been an emerging side of what we've done for the past, half that time, 7-8 years. And that's a fascinating part of it too. I mean, we've been helping to sell product, but the thing is that it's all been online. So, if I have a data management platform and a demand side platform and a data stack in-house, I'm already speaking that language. So I run the campaign, it's going to go to the landing page, which by the way has a buy button, then I can track it. So, Michael and I are on a call at 2:30 today, and we're going to actually be talking to a company that needs branding for e-commerce, right? So now we're going to have to be strategic and better understanding what their ultimate goals are, but it will come down to they need to push a product, and we need to help them push it. We don't do fulfillment, right? And I mean, that's the other side, but we will bring eyeballs to the brand, bring eyeballs to that flashy buy now button, and then go from there.
Branding is so fascinating to me, and it's become more of a hot topic through many of the conversations I've had, because now with the creative economy, and when I speak of that, it's just basically any entrepreneur who can brand themselves. Almost everybody is a walking brand and can productize themselves. So now you see just individuals approaching PR agencies or marketing agencies that need a full campaign. And it's a much different approach than a business that's a conglomeration of, hundreds or thousands of people, where it could be somebody just like me. And I'm like, hey, Kurt, can you help me? I need to have a brand. I need to go through some sort of branding campaign so that more people can listen to the podcast. Therefore, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit of a differentiation than your traditional clients.
Right. Well, a name can take you so far, right? But a name means nothing if it doesn't stand for anything. So whether it's the person and the persona and what they have done in their lives that attract me to why I want to follow them, to buy from them, is different than the people behind the company that are producing the next fabulous widget. Because there are so many aspects to, okay, this person, and even in the, this whole horrible cancel culture that, so many are being subjected to, for right or wrong, but still, right, they are their own brand. And, they've been called out, stepped out of line or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're almost non-existent, to a certain audience. And, that's a kind of an annihilation. That's like, I guess back in the day you would call that a character assassination.
Yes.
Now product-wise, I mean, sometimes that happens, and you can see that, so many people are kind of aligning them with products that actually stand for something, that stand for a cause, or that are spending their monies to help save the environment, save, whatever, less carbon footprint. It's fascinating if people want to have that brand dialogue. It's fascinating if you're open up to the long-term play of getting to the essence of what you, the individual, stand for, or what they, the company, stand for. Because, we're far more sophisticated, especially this last year, right? We've had information overload tenfold because, we're filling in the gaps. Number one, we're also curious to know what's the next big announcement for COVID, right? It kind of had an interesting, from my sense of it, kind of had this interesting and kind of triggering curiosity to a greater degree. And so people are tuned in, right? And I mentioned to you, every day I have this routine of listening to these 10 different podcasts just to get the day started, get the juices flowing, but better understanding what's happening internationally, nationally, locally, and so on. But it does kind of get like, oh, wow. I mean, I can say that I'm far more informed than just reading the newspaper, right? Which I still get to live. My wife and I still get to live every day, right? But, I have the online version, I have this version, but, I think that, for me, I will forever want to learn something new. And I will be the first to tell you, I'm still learning a lot, and I enjoy the learning process. Yeah. Right? It's they always said, right? It's first, first step is to understand, and then the second step is to be understood. And I think that's also been something in the back of our approach to what we try to do with, listening to a client, having them talk about their goals, their aspirations, what the pressure is that's going to, they need to do because competitors have come into the market and so on. And I've always been fascinated by the consumer side of that. How do we get somebody to take action? that benefits you, which summarily indirectly benefits us.
The consumer mind is so strange, and just continuing along the lines of branding and this the separation of the entrepreneur and the business. An example I use on here a lot is Elon Musk. He seems to be this crazy anomaly where people buy Tesla because they like Elon Musk, but then you see him recently going on and moving markets and stock prices and Bitcoin and giving people different opinions on Tesla.
The meme stocks,
right? Now you see this a lot with different entrepreneurs as well, is like their personal brand image is so tied to the company that the majority of the consumers are actually buying the product because of the personality rather than the product itself.
I wonder how in past eras there's ever been this, maybe you can look at it as a cult of personality. I think there are negative connotations to what that means, but if you take the positive side of it, right, he does have a following. So many do. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know if my parents grew up at a time where it was a brand that was embodied in a person. And I think that's a phenomenon that our generation, our kids, my kids' generation, and so on, will have because, they're going to follow them and do what they want, or at least attribute something to them because, they value that it's cool, they value it's innovative. I mean, you can't stop somebody from having these grand ideas. And, if you realize what he does, which I think is pure genius in its simplicity, he takes a small idea and he makes it big, right? So, right, how am I going to, even in town, right, this whole boring company, right? Everybody's talked about taking a big tunnel boring machine and, putting a subway system beneath the strip. But, he's doing it. He was smart enough to get out front of it. He was smart enough to build a company to do it. Now everybody wants one, in this town especially, right? Simple idea, but put his cars in it. He's the master of reinforcing his own brands. You could say the flamethrower could have went around, but I'm just fascinated by our generation having so many strong personalities that are kings and queens of industry, and we flock to them because we believe in them as a personal brand and the brands that they express, right? I think in my parents' generation, it would have been personality driven related to, there were only so many television stations.
Yeah,
right?
and like musical artists.
Yeah, so it would have been that stood behind a cause. And, now it's so varied, but it's powerful nevertheless. It's just that in his case, there are, you can talk about the SEC investigating why he can control and dictate, the value of a stock. That hearing is coming, right? Mm-hmm. If it already hasn't happened. But then you have the personalities behind all the different social media platforms. And, and I think about simple idea and made so useful. It is the Kleenex of our generation. We gotta have it. And it's important that, you either stay relevant in the space or you don't. And a lot of, some people choose not to participate, others do. And not to say that one will be left behind or the other, but I'm continually fascinated because now for me, I'm seeing it through, my teenage sons, right? What they do. And, my wife and I, need to kind of police that, and trust them because, we all know, and there have been how many documentaries now done on what that is doing to shape the brain and all that. But, that they have a healthy dose of it and a controlled, disciplined approach, then they do. But, my son's interested in getting cryptocurrency. He's interested in buying Bitcoin. Partial share through Robinhood, but it never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, technology's really opened up branding to the younger generation. You see, what was that? This 6-year-old who was making $10 million reviewing toys on YouTube, and so it becomes this double-edged sword where you can start branding at a much younger age to reach a wider audience, but it could also have drastic implications on your mental well-being because of those negative reviews. So that's why I think something like BrainTrust comes in good into play, because you could come in and you apply your critical thinking, and you're like, hey, maybe this student or kid or whatever that's starting at 10, maybe he should only be online for a certain amount of hours, but you can craft his messaging this way so that it doesn't have lasting implications on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, nobody knows the impact this is going to have. Child labor laws kick in, the 6-year-old, I mean, you should be paying whatever, right? Parents got to pay the IRS for whatever that, But that was said about our generation. It was said about our parents' generation, right? It always goes back, and back, right? I was, yelled at to get off, Mr. Smith's lawn, right? At some point I'll be doing that too. Get up my lawn. But, I think it sounds trite, but right, in moderation. But I think as long as it's not that addictive side, I think that's the thing that my wife and I've, wanted to put experiences in front of our kids, because, it's not, hey, here's the toy, go play with the toy. It's like, hey, here's the conversation. That sits here. Let's talk and interact. And I think it's an interesting, especially for my youngest, is that, he grew up in a game playing side of the world, and better for worse, my wife and I, we don't have games. We didn't have games. We had books. And I attribute my wife, because I'm more of a watcher. My wife, Robin, is a reader. And I think the reader generation is not as big as it once was. So she's not only a long format writer, which is in high demand, but she's the type that, she consumes books. And my sons have taken that up. And, but then on the flip side, with me being a watcher, I'm a visual learner. So we have this wonderful mix with the written word and the drawn word, or the drawn expression, which I think is a good balance for them. But, critical thinking for us starts in the house. It starts at the dinner table, or it starts on, when we're doing outside chores, right? I think it's important. So, yeah, I hear those stories all the time about these, rags to riches exploitation of the cute kid, and, the fact that, that there's an audience for that. Good for them.
Yeah, you just really have to be careful the way that society's progressing, especially now with virtual reality. That's something that I've kind of been following a little bit more, where this digital, and it's because of my interest in crypto, where you can have these digital worlds with digital land and real estate. But now I'm starting to see marketing inside of these digital worlds as well. Like, for example, Atari's in there building a casino, but then you see their logo all over this digital universe. And so it seems like you can't really escape marketing ever, or advertisement. It just becomes more inclusive into whatever world that you're going. It's just it's so fascinating, because I always thought of marketing as this basic idea, but it becomes more complex and intricate with every person that I talk with.
Well, but do you think that how shrewd the business decision was to embed the song in the actual game itself, right? If you think of how many, top 40 pop artists got their jingle into a particular movie or a particular, game. There are how many games out there now that my sons didn't really, we didn't really play, as I mentioned, but I think, again, it's getting in front of a consumer audience, triggering a behavior to buy. So how shrewd of them, how smart of them to get on the inside to say, hey, when they turn that corner and the logo, the logo placement of something comes on, and then, they press the button, then all of a sudden the music jingle starts. It's very reinforcing. So I didn't grow up that way. My kids necessarily didn't. But as a marketer, you got to kind of scratch your chin and go, hey, that's pretty smart. You're reaching a good audience.
Yeah. Seems like the complexity is within the simplicity itself, as catch-22 this sounds. Kurt, I have one final question for you before we get out of here. Same question I ask everybody. What does Las Vegas mean to you?
Las Vegas is home. My roots are here. I take great pride in being a resident here. My wife and I have grown our family here. And we both come, from two separate areas. I'm a Northern California boy. She came out from the Midwest when her parents relocated here. And I love the bright lights. I love the Wild West nature of it. It's a town built upon growth. And it's also a town that you still have so much to do and see, because the city, as you know, invents itself almost every weekend. And while the downturn plagued the marketplace for this past year, I'm very bullish about all that's coming back, all that is reverting here. And quite frankly, all those great and wonderful restaurants I once wanted to visit all came here. Having a staycation in this town is a fantastic thing to do. But I also love the fact that, 30 miles to the east of where my wife and I live, I have Lake Mead. 50 miles to the northwest, I have the pine forest, and skiing at Mount Charleston. So, and then I have the great desert, backdrop of all the wonderful, the wonderful hillsides and mountainsides that become, the Red Rock Loop. So it's home to me, and I'm a proud Las Vegan.
Yeah, I'm so bullish on Vegas. It's insane. Where do I send all the listeners and viewers to learn more about you, follow BrainTrust, anything notable?
Sure. Our website is, BrainTrustAgency.com. I can be reached. It's very simple. It's kind of funny, as, Michael and I have the only one, our first name and then, the wonderful at comment. So I'm Kurt at BrainTrustAgency.com. Mike Wojtowicz would be his full name spelled out with a period separating first and last name. And then, look, we're here to help. Always has been a big thing, and we believe our help is valuable and can show value to those that are interested in, going down this road of marketing.
Yeah, without a doubt, through this hour-long conversation, I understand the depth to your knowledge when it comes to branding, marketing, PR, and the ever-expanding nature of BrainTrust. So thank you for coming on and sharing your time. This has been an incredible conversation.
Happy to be here, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you next time.